Exciting. We're so excited to have this conversation. I'm Roslyn. I am a strategic membership manager at Impact Genome, and I'm so thrilled to be here alongside the Levine Foundation and Reed Charlotte to talk about a topic that feels really pressing right now. So us here in the social impact sector, we know that the demand to prove your impact is not going away anytime soon, and it's more important than ever. But how can we really shift from this feeling of intense scrutiny on our impact work and into a greater confidence around our impact strategy? So before we jump into the panel, I just want to take a brief second to talk a little bit about what we do here at Impact Genome. So we are an organization that helps nonprofits build trust by proving their impact, plain and simple. We do this through the industry's leading impact registry, a tool that enables nonprofits, social enterprises, and funders to really verify and communicate the impacts that they are making in a way that's credible and standardized, and most importantly, actionable. Where can we go from here? And why does this matter? So right now we know that the sector is full of really well-intentioned efforts, people doing really great work, but it's almost impossible to compare the work and learn from it or really invest in organizations at scale. So the Impact Genome Registry is a global infrastructure for measuring and verifying impacts. So any nonprofit or social program in the world can use our registry to verify the outcomes that they're achieving. And it's not just nonprofits that are using the registry. We have governments and corporations and major philanthropic institutions who are relying on us to help them track the outcomes of their funding and investments. We verified over 5,000 programs representing more than $6.5 billion in social spend. So the registry really, what's exciting about us is that we strive to raise the bar for impact reporting and evidence while also lowering the administrative burden of doing so. So we do this through our verified impact report and our impact verified seal. So we provide nonprofits with a comprehensive, funder agnostic, investor grade reports that they can use over and over again. And really it serves as a trusted signal to the market that an organization's results have been third-party validated. So we help nonprofits demonstrate outcomes, not just outputs. We don't ask folks to collect new data, but instead we really help nonprofits communicate the data that they already have in a way that builds confidence with funders, with communities, and within their own organizations. We also know that this is, of course, part of a larger shift. So funders aren't just looking for feel-good stories, but rather they really want to know what actually works. How is their investment creating this impact? And of course, we know that nonprofits are always looking for ways to get more exposure and get in front of funders who value data and who value outcomes-based measurement. So once an organization is verified with Impact Genome, they can opt into being a part of this searchable public registry where they can be discovered by new funders who are looking for programs to support. So we've always said that nonprofits should own their own impact data, and the product of any impact reports should not just live on a shelf somewhere, never to be seen again. So the registry is a place that Leon Levine Foundation can see their impact producers all in one place, but it's also a place where funders like the Leon Levine Foundation can search by their impact priority or their geography to find new organizations to support. So we think there are about 1 million ways to say that we're currently living in uncertain times or unprecedented times. And I think this is something that we've all heard really again and again, and it's certainly a challenge. But we also know that there's a need to really push through and operate programs in communities despite a lot of the challenges at play. So right now we're seeing a couple of things stand out and hearing pretty consistently from funders and nonprofits that we're working with. The first really being there's no shared standard or framework in impact measurement. So every grant or every funder is asking for something completely different. And this both adds undue pressure and undue burden on impact producers while making it so funders are also having a hard time seeing and trusting the full aggregate view of their impact. We also know that the work is happening. There are so many organizations doing really important things, but it's hard to communicate that work and that success effectively. So this is something you'll hear in the panel today. Having a third-party verification can really go a long way in building that trust and helping both funders and nonprofits confidently speak to the impact that they're making. And finally, we know that there's really a deep desire to shift towards a more trust-based, transparent funding relationship. But as funders are put under more scrutiny and under a microscope, it's essential that they really have the ability to answer the questions that they're getting confidently. So what does this mean? This means that they trust the work that organizations are doing, their partners are doing, because they've seen the work and they've worked with them for a long time. But this also means that they have the data to back it up. And similarly, nonprofits need the validation and need the verification because they want to spend time working on things that actually work and not waste time on what is not working. So I'm really excited. You're going to hear from two incredible organizations today, the Levine Foundation and Read Charlotte, about how they're putting this all into action. So they've gone really beyond reporting and beyond compliance, and they're using impact data to align internally, to tell better stories, and to invest smarter. So we'll jump into introductions. Like I said, I'm Rosalind. I'm here with Impact Genome. I'm also joined by my colleague Lauren, who will be here to help answer questions as we go. And I'll jump into starting with introducing our panelists. We have Monroe. Monroe Richardson is the founding executive director of Read Charlotte, a civic initiative of the Foundation for the Carolinas that unites families, educators, and community partners with the goal of improving third grade reading proficiency in Mecklenburg County, North Carolina. Monroe has worked in philanthropy for most of the past 25 years and began his career on Capitol Hill, where he worked for 2 United States senators. Monroe is a fantastic leader in the Carolinas. We're really excited to have him here. Moving on to our Levine folks, we've got Sarah. Sarah is the Director of Information Management at the Levine Foundation. Over her 9-year tenure, she's held diverse roles spanning from programmatic grant making, operations, and IT. With a background in psychology and education, Sarah brings a multidisciplinary approach to her work. A native Charlottean, she's a proud graduate of the Queen's University of Charlotte. And finally, Lindsay. Lindsay Messenger is Director of Research and Evaluation with the Levine Foundation. Lindsay joined the foundation in 2023 after nearly 20 years conducting research and education in healthcare settings, most recently at Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools. Raised in Cleveland, Ohio, she earned her undergraduate degree from New York University and graduate degrees from Fordham University, and has lived in Charlotte for 11 years. So I'd love just to kind of kick us off. If we could, can we turn to just briefly talking about your organization's role in the community and who you serve, just so we're all on the same page here. Monroe, I'll turn it to you.
Thanks, Rosalind. And thanks for having me. It's great to be here this afternoon. So, Read Charlotte is a 10-year-old civic initiative here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And our job is to help our community work together to essentially solve a collective action problem. Everyone cares about early literacy, and our job is to help everyone work together and to align that work with the very best evidence-based knowledge we have and really driven by research and data. So we routinely serve one of 4 roles. We convene people, sometimes we're a catalyst, other times we're an advisor, and then sometimes we're an advocate. So it's a unique role as an intermediary, but we really try to leverage the tremendous assets we have in our community and help them work better together on behalf of schools, educators, families, and kids.
Awesome, thank you. I'll turn it then over to you, Lindsay. Tell us a little bit about who is the Levine Foundation in the community? Who do you serve?
Sure. Hi, everyone. The Levine Foundation's mission is to empower underserved South Carolinians to be self-sufficient and strengthen our Jewish community. So that means that we are a funder giving grants in 4 areas. So our 4 mission areas are healthcare, human services, education, and Jewish values. And I'll maybe get into this a little bit more as we kind of start answering some of the questions, but we give multiple different types of grants and are really trying to be strategic in the initiatives that we fund so that we can solve root causes of problems and prevent problems from beginning related to self-sufficiency, but also related to strengthening our Jewish community.
Awesome, thank you. One thing to flag as questions come up, as you think through the panel today, feel free to put questions into the Q&A function and we'll have folks monitoring that, and we'll have time for some question and answers at the end. And we'll just jump in. I think, Lindsay, back to you. I'd love to ask and kind of start out your approach to measurement, your approach to impact and evaluation, how's that evolved over time at the Leon Levine Foundation? And how would you say you've addressed some of the key challenges that have come up along the way?
Sure. So before I really jump into answering this question, I'll give it kind of an overview of where the Leon Levine Foundation is now, which will maybe help frame some of this. So there's been substantial growth of the Leon Levine Foundation over the last 2 years, both in the size of our staff, but also in the size of the foundation's assets. Mr. Levine started Family Dollar right here in Charlotte, and unfortunately passed away in 2023. Long before he passed away, he wanted to make a second career in philanthropy. So he had retired from running Family Dollar and started the foundation. When he passed away, a large portion of his estate was transferred to the foundation. So that means that we have a lot more money to give away as grants. Another transition that also has to do with grants is that historically we've given unrestricted general operating grants, which means that an organization can use the money for any of its programs or operating costs. And we'll continue to make these types of grants, and we've extended many of them to be for 3 years, whereas they used to be a single year. But we're intentionally shifting our time and energy to cultivate these strategic grants that I mentioned before. So addressing root causes of issues, preventing problems from starting, and changing systems that perpetuate or exacerbate issues related to poverty. And then a third transition is related to the way that we invest the assets of the foundation. So historically, we've invested in traditional financial investments focused on a substantial return on our investment. And now we're committed to making 100% of our portfolio impact investments, which have a non-concessionary market rate of return and a measurable positive social impact. So in plainer English, that means that these investments do good for our communities and make money for the foundation to maintain its assets so that we have more money to give away. And for us, these investments fall into 4 categories: educational technology, healthcare access, affordable housing, and economic mobility. And then finally, the last transition is related to all of the others that I've just mentioned. So we want to be able to measure and explain the impact of both of our grants and our impact investments on the communities that we serve. And so this is where our partnership with Impact Genome comes in. So now I'll get to answering the actual question. So over time, our approach to measurement has really shifted. So in the past, we focused more on simple outputs, like how many people were served, how many people received a meal, or were treated at or seen at a clinic. And so that kind of output data still has value, but we've realized it doesn't always tell us whether the needle is actually moving on the big outcomes that we care about. And what we want to know is, are our partners achieving their goals? So we've also come to see that evidence needs to be both credible and usable for both funders and nonprofits. So working with Impact Genome has helped us to do this by giving us access to standardized outcomes and benchmarks across our issue areas or our mission areas. So instead of asking every organization to reinvent the wheel with custom metrics and reports, we can now lean into these shared measures that support long-term learning and allow us to make accurate comparisons over time.
Awesome. Thank you. It's helpful in setting the stage, kind of thinking about there's a lot of evolution that comes into play, and to the point of, our conversation today, how does that all impact the actual strategy? And how does that work when you're thinking about the next 5, 10, 20 years? That's helpful. Monroe, similar question. I'm curious to you, just thinking from the other angle, from the other side, as an intermediary, as a nonprofit, how's your approach to measurement and evaluation maybe changed, especially I think given this growing need to prove impact with a lot less resources?
Yeah. I mean, I understand from the funder side. I've spent a lot of my career on that side, and there's a stewardship responsibility that is there. And I know that that's incredibly important to be able to be accountable for the funds that you've been entrusted with. I think, as an individual running an organization, I think particularly as an intermediary, where we don't provide direct service, our partners do. We've long struggled with how to communicate impact where we all are concerned about educational outcomes for children ultimately. But when you're trying to achieve impact through others, how do you account for that? And looking back over the last 10 years I've been in this role, I've been reflecting this year that oftentimes I think we've made impact in certain areas. We've strengthened the capacity of partners. We've helped them to be able to do more. But yet, if it wasn't student outcomes changing, not only did it feel like we weren't able to talk about that, but I would find that even internally we would dismiss it. And so I think part of the challenge is that you're making impact in lots of ways. And however it is that you're reporting it, you're only talking about a fraction of the actual difference or impact or results that you're making. But how do you communicate that in a way that translates to other people intelligibly? How do you get out of your own way sometimes because you're so close to the work? It's sometimes hard to be reflective and fully communicate. And yet I feel like there is the imperative for all nonprofits to do that. Because if you are working hard, you're out there, you are helping partners, or if you're providing direct services, you really need to have the resources so that your beneficiaries can receive, those services or supports. And so I do believe it's incumbent upon those of us that are providing services and support to make sure that we're communicating that in a way so that as folks who are making decisions about investments, who are all looking for impact, right, are able to like appropriately make informed decisions about where they can put precious resources, right, to good use, so that ultimately, whether it's schools or educators or kids or families or whomever, are actually benefiting from whatever it is that you're doing. So, um, it's a constant challenge, and I think as an intermediary, we oftentimes have particular challenges in that the sort of outcomes reporting world that we live in is largely focused on direct service providers. So you're oftentimes trying to shoehorn what you do into that sort of framework. And I'll tell you, in the last year, I have to admit, I've looked at reports, like I'll look at a grant that I submitted, I'll look at reports, and I'm asking myself, why in the world did I ever sign up for that? Because I don't run schools, I don't do direct programs. Why did I submit something that looks like I did? Well, it's because the model sort of tried to, told me that's what I had to do. So I do think that, in this current time that we're in, as everyone's really sort of grappling with what do the changes mean for our organizations, one of the most important things that we can all do is make sure that we're doing as good a job as we can, communicating well, who we are, what are we doing. I was thinking about Lindsay's comments about outputs, and three questions that I've asked my team repeatedly over the last decade is, how much are we doing, how well are we doing it, and is anyone better off? And we can use all sorts of fancy language, but I think those are sort of the three questions that we want to ask, and we do need to know how much we're doing, but I think also how well are we doing it, and is anyone better off? And having clear ways to communicate that are credible. I think that's the challenge for all nonprofits, right, that are trying to do the work.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate your focus on communication because that's something that I think is so hard for both funders and on the service side is great work is happening and we're all trusting that that's happening. But how do we then take that step further to really communicate it? I think this gets into an interesting question that we have received in the Q&A from Eli or from Eli. And it's as an economic development evaluator, when I try to get organizations to track outcomes and not just outputs, they say things like, well, those are out of our control. There's too many additional factors at play. So how do you get your grantees to respond to this kind of change? And I think this ties nicely into thinking about your partnership with Impact Genome, Sarah. How can we think through what originally drew you to Impact Genome, what drew you to this work, and how did you then communicate what this was going to be to the grantees that you're working with?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And I see some of our partners on this call. So what I'm about to say will not come as a surprise to them. But at the Levine Foundation, we really evaluate grant applications through three kind of pillars. So one is leadership at the board and the executive level within an organization. The next one is sustainability. So operationally, do you have a succession plan? Do you have a strategic plan? Are you staffed correctly? What do your finances look like? What are those financial trends? And then the third one is track record. So are you doing what you say you're doing? And we had historically taken the stance of we really want the nonprofit to be able to tell us what success looks like to them, and tell that story. But we were also trying to balance that with this idea of looking holistically at our portfolio. And so if we get a lot of different outcomes, it's very difficult to kind of think across the entire portfolio of what impact we're really having as funders. And so I went to the Peak Grant Making Conference and I heard a panel from Impact Genome. And the thing that really drew me to Impact Genome was this concept of balance where there's a shared taxonomy. So the partner is still able to choose what success looks like for them, but it's now done in a way that is more consistent. And so it gives us as the funder the opportunity to kind of look at impact or look at outcomes or outputs across a portfolio more broadly. But the other thing we're always trying to balance is, you know, we want to be respectful of our grant partners' time. They are doing their really important work. They're the boots on the ground. And so we don't want to be asking for things that aren't going to be influencing the outcome of the grant decision. And then also what Impact Genome does is not only is it a benefit to us as the funder through the standardization model, but it also hopefully will build the capacity maybe even of the nonprofit organization or the grant partner organization, because it might take some of the guesswork out of impact reporting. And then it also gives them the opportunity to be discoverable by other organizations that are funding in the same space. And so this sort of mutual benefit for different reasons for both us as the funder and the grant partners is what really drew me to Impact Genome. And I think helping articulate, this really just isn't another ask from us as a funder. What we're trying to also do is hopefully build the capacity of your organization as well while streamlining our outcomes process.
Yeah. The beautiful thing about having a partner on the call is we can see what they thought about that process, which is awesome. So Monroe, as a partner of the Leon Levine Foundation, as someone that went through the reporting process with us, to be totally honest, I know that you had previously mentioned that you were a little skeptical of the process and a little skeptical of us. So please, I'd love to hear kind of how your thinking evolved over the process. And yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, I'll admit I was skeptical at the outset. Couple of things. So I was on the other side of what Sarah said. So my team asked, why are we doing it? Because the Leon Levine Foundation asked us to. Uh, and I think even the initial kickoff call, some of the language used was like your program, well, it's like, well, we're not a program. So I'll admit I was skeptical. And I do have someone on my team that's a data coordinator. So we sort of work together. And I'll just say at the outset, my team is like, we're crazy about um, continuous improvement. My team's gone to improvement science conferences for the last 8 years. We believe in exit tickets. We don't like holding meetings without asking people what we do. We look at the data. We're constantly asking how we can get better. One of if it's okay to mention a book that we like, How to Measure Anything by Douglas Hubbard. So, when people say, oh, I can't measure, yes, you can measure anything, right? So that wasn't the issue, but I was, to be honest with you, first pleasantly surprised that Impact Genome really was able to understand an organization like ours that's an intermediary. Um, I was told, yes, we can help support what you do, and in fact, it was true. And I guess I would say, like, I felt like finally, after 9 or 10 years, like finally someone got us, because I have looked for years at a lot of different frameworks, trying to figure out a way, how do I explain what we do? And my data coordinator and I, like, we were just floored by just like the quality of the sort of the way it was laid out, the questions, thinking about, metrics that were appropriate for an organization like ours. And it didn't, our biggest challenge initially was, well, which one of our projects do we use, right? So we picked one, but we both independently very quickly realized like we wanted to entirely redo our entire approach to outcomes, sort of using the framework that we saw in from Impact Genome. And so we've spent actually the last 3.5 months as a team going through project by project, reorganizing, thinking about the activities, the metrics. We're right now in the process of lining out annual targets and milestones for the next 5 years. But even in those discussions, we're already asking, okay, we need to make sure we have this so we can report it to Impact Genome, right? So it's really sort of giving us a really nice framework. And I would say even in Charlotte, as I've been talking with groups that are dealing with the uncertainty, I mean, I've been talking about Impact Genome around town because I think, it's one thing to say, this is our impact, here's my yardstick. And by my yardstick, we made an impact. It's entirely different when someone else says, okay, here's a valid yardstick. And I will say the one project that we had reviewed, we took an evidence-based approach to teaching kids basically basic phonics skills that we saw in a What Works Clearinghouse practice guide. And it's a different way of teaching phonics that's used in the UK, Australia, New Zealand. And we use that as a basis for a turnkey, easy to use sort of program or curriculum to focus on kindergartners, right? And that makes it easy for community-based organizations to use it. And the challenge I had, because I was getting questions from some funders, board members, well, how do we think about this? How do we know whether it's impactful? And one of the challenges I think in our space is oftentimes when we're starting something new, people want to go immediately to child outcomes, and that's important. But you have to first get through the organizational change in outcomes, right, before you're ever going to get to the child outcomes. And what was really great, the timing on this was perfect, was that we got our report back that was really focused on how did you help other organizations, be able to do more in helping kindergartners with the word reading skills. And I was able to like bring that report into one of my board packets, right? Answering a question that I had gotten from my board just at the prior board meeting. So, I think for us, and if this is for intermediaries, right, I can only imagine how good it is for direct service providers if the level of thinking and clarity is there for an organization like ours. So, it has just changed, like I said, the way that we've approached it. We're probably about 2/3 through completely redoing our outcomes framework. And I'm looking forward to having additional projects that we can submit to Impact Genome in the future.
That's awesome. Thank you. Cheryl Brandberg, also of Community Housing Solutions of Guilford, also mentioned in the chat, they were also skeptical as well, and were able to kind of see the evolution of working with Impact Genome and what that meant. I think to your point previously too, of that communication with external facing audiences as well. You're speaking so well to the fact that it's helped you really look internally at your program and how you want to structure things and how you want to structure measurement and evaluation. But on the other hand too, being able to, like you said, take it to board meetings, being able to communicate with additional funders or donors, I think is a really big win that we're seeing folks celebrate. So that's great. I think to that question, then I think there's this element of partnership here that I really want to dig into a little bit, because being able to take this report to a funder and say, here's my impact, here's what I do. I want to first preface this with just an answer from a question that we had in the Q&A, which was, how do you standardize this information? How do you make sure you're not overinflating your impact? So someone asked, how can the standardization be done to not overinflate impact? And I want to just clarify that we're able to speak to the grant amounts that funders are giving. So you'll have a program laid out in your verified impact report or verified, and you're able to then have, given the grant amounts that different funders have given you, be able to kind of section it accordingly to show what amount of impact can be quote unquote ascribed to different funders, and not say we've done 1 million things, we've made 1 million people happy, whatever it is that you're looking to do. So that's kind of the premise of this question, but thinking through your partnership between funders that you're working with, between the Leon Levine Foundation and organizations in Charlotte, I'd love to just kind of hear from you, how has it changed maybe the conversations that you're having between each other and with the folks that you're working with? And then how can we kind of shift this to thinking about in impact and measurement on the whole, and working with funders and nonprofits? How is this changing this idea of accountability or compliance? We'll start with Lindsay.
Um, so yes, I think it's influenced our conversations around strategy, evaluation, planning for the future. So working with Impact Genome has prompted us to take a step back, think more intentionally about how we're defining success. So not just for our nonprofit partners, but also for ourselves as a funder. So it's led to deeper internal conversations about really four things. So first, what are we asking of our partners? Second, any capacity that we can provide beyond our grant dollars. Third is, how do we align our grant making and our impact investments? And then fourth, how we measure outcomes in a way that actually supports learning and progress. So the partnership has really changed our thinking on where we can make the biggest difference. So we're thinking more strategically about how our funding aligns with the outcomes that we care most about, and where there's strong evidence that a program or an approach is really making that impact. And then at the same time, over the last year, we've spent time creating theories of change, or what we're calling theories of impact, for each of our mission areas. So together, the theories we've created and this measurement framework are shifting our decisions about where to go bigger, where to scale up support. And then the last thing I'll add here is this framework is really opening the door to more collaboration with peer funders. So if we're able to use shared metrics, then it becomes easier to coordinate funding, compare results, and work together towards a broader impact across the Carolinas.
That's great. Myrna, I'm curious your thoughts on thinking through this piece. How can we turn it from rather this accountability have to do to this kind of shared learning tool?
Yeah, we often think about data as having three different purposes. So data for learning, data for action, data for impact. And if we only think about looking at data to report impact, we're missing the opportunities to learn and improve, but then also to help us sort of inform what kind of actions we should be taking. Um, it feels to me like, and I'm hopeful that these sorts of conversations can hopefully break down some of the silos between funders and nonprofits. I often advise, having worked on that side, I often advise my colleagues, like, you know, you as a funder, you're looking for opportunities to turn your dollars into impact. And so, that you need nonprofits, you need high quality organizations that are going to do that for you. Um, I think, one of the things I was thinking about is that, if you have a program or have a project or what have you, and you are working to submit it, go through the Impact Genome process, part of that process is also going to reveal to you what kind of information do we need to be collecting, what kind of questions do we need to be asking, what kind of processes, and it's also going to be telling you what kinds of things should we be looking at routinely. And it may reveal to you, here are the kinds of things that we should be thinking about or looking at. And I don't know where else you would get that, to be honest with you, right? You're trying to figure it out. And I think, in a way, I could imagine, even if you weren't able to complete profile for Impact Genome, or you got a score that wasn't what you were looking for, it would provide you with clarity about, here's the kinds of things you need to be doing. And hopefully that could help, inform a conversation. The other thing I think about is just, pulling on implementation science, that we know it takes, if you're trying something new, it can take 2 or 3 years before you're actually able to see, get to the level of implementation before you even can get to, beginning to see outcomes. And then lastly, the world we operate in is messy. I mean, I love research and data. It's wonderful to see a great randomized control trial. I love effect sizes. I love, benchmarking them and things like that. But we operate in the real world, and we don't operate in clean, controlled environments. And generally, there's not a straight line to impact. It's like really squiggly. And so we need to have some way and some framework for us to have that, sort of a conversation about where are we, what are we learning, what kinds of improvements are we looking for? And I'm hopeful that both between funders, but also between funders and nonprofits, and hopefully between nonprofits, that this can provide somewhat of a structure and framework for us to sort of think about these questions and ask collectively, where are we? Where are we trying to get to? What do we need to learn? And what kind of information do we need to collect, right, to be able to understand how we go from where we are to where we want to go next. So I'm hopeful. I will say, as someone who has submitted a lot of grant applications and grant reports, I just did one early this morning. They all look very, very different. And part of what I appreciate about what Lindsay and Sarah are talking about is thinking about, if I'm going to ask for this information, what am I going to do with it? And I understand there's some aspect where, again, there's stewardship, there are things you need to report internally, perhaps externally. But thinking about, the information that we're asking to be collected, it's really cheap to ask for it, but it can be very expensive to give it. And that's also time you're not spending on something else as well, like, direct service or what have you. So um, I'm hopeful that this overall sort of approach to thinking about a standardized approach to um, outcome measurement, impact measurement, can lead to and open up conversations and maybe help underpin, ideas like trust-based philanthropy as well.
I want to dig into what Sarah and Lindsay would say to all of this, but I think to extrapolate a little bit more, Monroe, I'm curious about, there's a lot of folks asking about the logistics, about what does this look like? I want to be able to track outcomes. I don't know if I have the resources to do this. This seems complicated. This seems hard. And I'd love to just dig in a little bit because to your point of it showed you a lot more information about your own program. Could you extrapolate a little bit there and just to highlight, your program primary outcome that is listed for your program is improved or maintained program quality. So what does having that information really mean for you and your own internal processes going forward?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the core, I mean, Reach Charlotte does several things, but one of the core things we like to do is help close the research to practice gap. And we like to take really high quality evidence-based knowledge and turn that into practical tools that our partners can use. And one of the stories that I love the most is a nonprofit partner who we provided this, phonics-based resource called Queen City Readers, who had never served kindergartners before. And for the first time, because of having access to the materials and the training, it allowed them to move into a space and serve a group of children that they had never previously thought that they would be able to serve. So strengthening their capacity, allowing them to serve more. We love the idea of for example, bringing down the level of expertise required by whoever's directly providing the service, whether it's staff, whether it's volunteers. So thinking a lot about that aspect of the work. We spend a tremendous amount of time of that. We ask lots of questions of our partners. We're looking to make tweak to resources we provide, and pay a lot of attention to what is it enabling you to do. So whether it's something that we've created, that we've taken from research and created, and we've done that a few times, or things that we found elsewhere that exist, but we help bring in and introduce it to our partners. We're always asking that question, because at the end of the day, we want to figure out, how do we do more with the resources that we have? And we think that's part of the value add of an organization like ours. and having the report sort of validate that was really helpful to us because, I was trying to explain, hey, we're doing something here, but and we're making a difference to these nonprofits, but to have the report come from Impact Genome that like validated that, I mean, that was tremendously helpful for us. Again, because we don't do direct service, and although I can talk about, here are the outcomes that our partners have seen, I really feel from like sort of a direct connection, right? Our work is really directly focused on that. Um, the other thing I would just say tacked onto that, and I saw one question, looks like Trish Wallace asked about, tracking indicators and confounding factors and causality. I was when I was at Improvement Science Conference last year, there's this concept that I picked up that just immediately resonated for me, and it's this idea of degree of belief. You're not always going to have clear causal evidence. Most times we're not. But I think if you can have a very compelling picture around, here's either the evidence, the research, whatever that is sort of driving us. And then do I have enough, can I provide you with enough information that I can increase your degree of belief? And for me, my degree of belief, right? That more likely than not, right? This program, this intervention, this service, if we can't say cause, we can say associate it with, contribute to it significantly. And I think again, we live in a messy world, and if we're going to wait for perfect, we're never going to get anything done. So I think again, what I'm also hopeful that some of this will help with is we sometimes think about causality. We can't always do randomized controlled trial studies. We often think about things like effect sizes or implementation with fidelity. But I think implementation with integrity is important. In fact, there has been some good research. I've seen Jimmy Kim at Harvard a couple of times has shown that when you allow educators to make tweaks on an evidence-based intervention, they can actually get even better, impact. Why? Because they're bringing their dynamic knowledge, right, to understanding. And I've seen that multiple times. So implementation with integrity, I think degree of belief, but having the structure that something like Impact Genome can offer to not just say, oh, I think it worked, but like, here's the structure, here's the work, here's what we collected, but to provide a compelling story that would increase your degree of belief and the degree of belief of your funders and supporters that your program is actually making an impact. So I'm hopeful that this also will help sort of um, level set this conversation for those of us that do want to use research, but also have to work in the real world where it's messy, right?
I love that. I love that leading with integrity piece. Sarah, I'm curious from your side as a funder, what insights did you see? Do these resonate from the funder perspective of it's not perfect, but there's certainly progress to be seen when you're able to have these conversations?
Absolutely. Having a validated measurement is a high bar for a lot of organizations. And so the fact that Impact Genome helps equip those organizations with providing that to a funder, Monroe really nailed this. It creates a higher level of trust and sophistication that we can present to our board, but simultaneously, we're really hopeful that it provides that same resource to the organization so that they can take that to other funders and help tell their story. And so when I'm thinking about Impact Genome and what our role as a funder is, it's not only to help the our partners tell their story. We're working really hard with our peer foundations as well to help them understand what the benefit could be to their organizations. So again, you heard me say this earlier, I really feel like it's a win-win for everybody because it minimizes the burden of all those different reports that Monroe was talking about. We all know we asked for different reports. So can we kind of coalesce around a shared language and a shared understanding of what an outcome is, both as a nonprofit organization and as a funder, lowering the burden for our partners while also equipping us with what we need to be able to tell our story to our board or to the community as well. And so, this process is something that I think has been tried before, but what I love about Impact Genome is it's not a group of well-intentioned organizations coming together to try to figure this out and hash this out. There's a model that we can already plug into and a framework that we can already plug into that is, in my opinion, a low barrier to entry, and the outcome, I hope, for our partner organizations and then the foundations that are engaging in this work as well, the return on investment will be really high, both in terms of time and monetary investment as well. So it's something that shared language is really important, going slow and trying to learn from your nonprofit partners as they go through this process. Those are all the things that are really important, and Monroe kind of touched on all those as well.
Yeah, you're setting us up well to kind of think about what's next and what's happening, both I think in the Carolinas, where there's such an amazing cohort of funders who are exploring these topics, as well as just in the region in general. Lindsay, I'm curious if you can talk to this a little bit. You set it up well earlier, and just kind of thinking through where are you seeing your peers shift to when it comes to this kind of shared collective that Sarah's talking about versus this standardized measurement? What are the conversations that you're having with other funders?
Good question. So I would say we're not quite seeing a really widespread shift yet. When it comes to funders like fully embracing shared measurement frameworks, there are definitely a few exceptions, and I bet many of those folks are on the call today. But we still feel like we're kind of a unique small group in this effort to track outcomes, and in particular to summarize them across our mission areas or at our full grant making portfolio level. But we're really committed to this kind of holistic foundation-wide impact story. And all that said, we're not seeing the widespread shift yet, but we are seeing this growing interest, especially around the idea of reducing the burden on grantee partners. And that seems to be a major driver in this work. So what we find exciting about working with Impact Genome is that it allows us to reduce that burden without losing the ability to compare outcomes, without losing the ability to learn across programs, and without losing the ability to align with our peer funders. So we're kind of leaning into this momentum by hosting a convening this July with funders from across North and South Carolina, where we'll be sharing more about how we're approaching this shift and learning from others who are doing the same. So we really hope to kind of catalyze an evolution from fragmented measurement towards more sector-wide insight. So if you're a funder from North or South Carolina and you're on the call, feel free to get in touch with us about this convening next month.
I think you started to bring this up, Lindsay, but I'm curious. It feels like you guys are really at the forefront of thinking about this stuff and kind of helping folks to really come together to think about this. When you think about the field as a whole, what's one shift that you hope to see either in the short term or the long term when it comes to funding strategy?
Yeah. I mean, we'd really love to see kind of this broader adoption of shared impact frameworks. So like exactly what Impact Genome offers. So these kinds of tools as a suite make reporting more consistent and useful for both funders and the nonprofits. So like I said before, this would reduce the burden on grantee partners, and then allows funders to make fair and meaningful comparisons across time and across programs so that they can make good decisions about funding. So what we really want to kind of shift is the thinking away from checking a box and more towards actually learning from the impact story. So I'll say one more thing that's kind of about our larger blue sky vision. And that's like to really ramp this up and have a common framework for impact reporting that would satisfy all funders across the Carolinas. So it would save nonprofit staff time and administrative costs so that they can spend less time formatting reports and more time focusing on program delivery and strengthening their ability to really show why their work matters and how it drives change. And so it, like Sarah said before, it would give nonprofits and funders in our region this common language for impact. And it would just make it so much easier for us to align on goals and expectations for like big, life-changing grant partnerships.
This is probably music to everyone's ears on this call. It's needed, and we can't wait to see what happens. Minra, I'm going to pass it to you for our last question before we jump into any Q&A. But similar, I think, thinking through what is from the other side, what's one shift that you'd like to see, either short-term, long-term in the sector, and then what's next for you as an organization in thinking through outcomes measurement?
In Charlotte, there's active conversation about nonprofit agility, and that has a lot to do with just sort of the uncertainty, right, in the environment we're in, funding environment, changes in funding. Um, I do think that this topic today about how do you communicate the impact that you're making is an important part of thinking about agility and resilience in uncertain times. So I do think that from a shift standpoint, I think there's opportunity here. I've had the opportunity um, a couple of times so far this year to sort of look at a deck of a couple of different nonprofits that was sort of here's what we've done, and um, I've been able to provide kind of peer review, and in both cases, it was sort of like you got really great stuff, but you're really not elevating it, and I've been thinking a lot about that. So, I think a standardized way to think about how do you tell your story would be incredibly helpful shift. And then for us, as I alluded to earlier, we're rebuilding our outcomes framework. We're about 2/3 of the way through. And I would just say, like, we have a new resource that we just launched at the end of last year. We've got almost 1,000 kids being served in a pilot through a group of partners this summer. And it's basically a standardized way to help groups do a really good read aloud that focuses on three sort of comprehension skills. And we're already talking about like the data that we need to be able to collect so that we could submit it to Impact Genome. So, we're hoping to do more. We'll continue to talk with others about Impact Genome and how it can help them tell their story of impact.
Awesome. Thank you both. We've had a lot of really great questions, I think, that have been answered throughout the call. I think a lot of folks just looking for logistics and how do I do this and how can my organization do this? And I think it's really great to see both of you as, I think, I know I said this before, but an aspirational but an approachable example. I think it's possible, it's doable, and it's not necessarily perfection in this area, and it can't be, but it's progress, and it's getting us to the next stage of this all, which may be focused and centered in the Carolinas, which is very exciting to see. I'm going to go ahead and just wrap up, so we're on time here. But if you have questions about Impact Genome, if you have questions about anything we talked about today, we would love a chance to chat with you live and continue the conversation. I think a lot of great points were brought up today, and I just wanted to highlight this is, like I said, a place where both funders who are looking for a chance to really validate the investment that they're making can come to Impact Genome and really answer the question, can you back every funding decision that you've made? Do you have the evidence? Do you have the data to do so? We talked a lot about today how it's not going to be perfect. It's based in trust. There should be this level of trust-based philanthropy, but that can be backed up with data, that can be backed up with the numbers to really make sure everyone is able to communicate that impact as effectively as they can. And to that point, are you a nonprofit that's really struggling to demonstrate or validate your impact? Maybe you are a smaller organization and it's hard to kind of really bring this third-party validation to the forefront when you're having conversations with funders. Any of these things, or if you're based in the Carolinas, there's a lot of really great stuff. To Lindsay's point, the convening we're hosting later in July is going to be an awesome opportunity to connect in person. Impact Genome will be there, and we'd love to connect in person with both nonprofits, both with funders. So please reach out if you are in town in Charlotte, and we would love to to connect. In the meantime, you can always reach out to us. And I really want to thank our panelists for such a great conversation. It's really important right now, and not to be repetitive and echo that it's an uncertain and challenging time, but it is. And so I think the more conversations we can have and the more examples we can have, we can